Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we're going to talk about Pulsus paradoxus. Pulsus paradoxus can be normal and abnormal. So the definition of a normal Pulsus paradoxus is when we have a drop of less than 10 millimeter of mercury in our systolic blood pressure during inspiration. And it becomes abnormal when the drop is more than 10 millimeter of mercury of systolic pressure during the inspiration. So let's write down the basic definition. So the normal, a drop of systolic blood pressure less than 10 millimeter of mercury in inspiration. Now, two phenomena contribute to the Pulsus paradoxus, and these are normal phenomena that happens during inspiration. So we're going to talk about both. So the first, I would call it lung capacitance, and the second, I will call it diaphragm. Guys, I have uploaded a video about the anatomy of the airway. If you haven't watched that, I highly suggest that you watch it. It's very interesting and it relates to this topic as well. So in normal condition, like we said, we can have Pulsus paradoxus because of the lung capacitance and the diaphragm. Let's start with the diaphragm. So during the normal inspiration, we have a drop in our intrathoracic pressure in relation to our atmospheric pressure. So let's say our atmospheric pressure is 760 millimeter of mercury. If inside our thorax we have a pressure of 758, the air is gonna move in to equilibrate the pressure. And when the air moving, remember the main muscle of the respiration is the diaphragm. The diaphragm is gonna contract down to increase the space of our thoracic cage so we can get more air during inspiration. So here we're gonna put diaphragm contracts down. So what happened after the diaphragm contract down? The diaphragm is gonna impinge on our inferior venous cava. So remember, the inferior venous cava is a venous system, and in the venous system, they can only return the blood back to the heart because they have unidirectional valves that help them propulse the blood back to the heart. So that pinch on the inferior venous cava is going to increase the blood return into the right atria. So I'm going to try to draw a picture of the heart here. I'm not the best. So this is the right atrium, right ventricle, left ventricle, and left atria. And here in the back, we have our inferior venous cava coming here. So if we have a pinchment here, we have increase in pressure taking the blood back to the right atria, so we have more flow in the right atria. So that more flow is going to come back here inside the right ventricle, passing the tricuspid valve. Now we have a septum here that divides the right ventricle to the left ventricle, and also around the heart we have a fibrous sac that we call pericardium, and it can be divided into visceral and parietal, and we have a little bit of fluid in here that acts as cushion for the heart. So when we have a lot of blood return here, And because we have this cushion of a little bit of fluid, the right ventricle is going to extend, not much, but just enough to contract a little bit, to reduce a little bit the space of the left ventricle here. And if the space of the left ventricle is reduced here, we have less blood coming here from the left atrial to the left ventricle passing by the mitral valve. And if we have less blood here, the aorta is going to pump less blood, giving us a decrease in our cardiac output. And this is how we get a drop in the systolic blood pressure. But remember, this case is normal. The drop is only going to be less than 10 because the right ventricle is not going to push too much on the left ventricle. So this is the first phenomenon into inspiration that gives us the pulsus paradoxus. Now the second phenomenon is the lung capacitance. Remember, we're still talking about inspiration. So during the inspiration, we have a traction, a pulling traction on our pulmonary vasculature. Remember, the veins are high in capacitance. They retain more blood continence related to the arteries. So we have more blood into our venous system than in the artery system. And during the inspiration, because of that traction, more blood is going to come to the lungs and it's going to stay there. And that is going to decrease. Remember, the blood comes back here through the pulmonary veins in the left atrium. Pulmonary vein. So if we have blood stock in the lungs here, less blood is going to come from the pulmonary vein to the left atria, and this is also going to give us a decrease in our cardiac output. Decrease in cardiac output, which is going to give us the drop of less than 10 in our systolic blood pressure during the inspiration. Now, we also say that pulsus paradoxus can be abnormal if this drop is greater than 10. And a basic example would be during cardiac tamponade. Remember, during cardiac tamponade, this pericardial sac has a lot of fluids around. So, when the diaphragm contracts down during the inspiration and impinge on the inferior venous cava, more blood comes back to the right atrium, more blood comes down to the right ventricle. But the right ventricle, because of all this fluid around, cannot stretch forward that much. So because it can't go forward with the stretching, it's going to impinge more here. It's going to press down more on the interventricular septum here, decreasing even further the space of the left ventricle. This gives us a more drop in the cardiac output, and that's how we have even more less than 10 millimeter of mercury. So normally, if we have a systolic blood pressure, let's say 120 millimeter of mercury, in normal condition, pulsus paradoxus less than 10. If we have a drop to 112, this is normal. But in cardiac tamponade, you can have a drop to the 80 in cardiac tamponade because the fluid, we have a lot of fluid here. The right ventricle cannot push forward. The only way it can push is to the left, reducing this left ventricular space further, giving us a huge drop in the cardiac output, reflected by the systolic blood pressure even more lower so. So this is what I got today on pulsus paradoxus. If you like this video, please subscribe, share, and put a like. And leave me a comment as well, and see you on my next video. Thank you.